Hi everyone, this is Vishal, and in today's video we are going to take an example of a system. We are going to see how to approach that problem in a system design interview. I will give you guideposts on how to apply those principles on other problems, and also I will divide the entire interview into various sections that will help you take lead into your system design interviews so that you can actually lead or direct the entire interview process. Okay, so today's problem is very exciting. So we are asked to design an email application like Gmail. So definitely Gmail is a very complex application. No doubt it's very difficult to actually provide a solution to design Gmail in 45 minutes. Very difficult. Now what should we do in such cases? Definitely such problems are asked in an ambiguous manner to candidates to actually check how are they dealing with ambiguity in their day-to-day work life. So to deal with ambiguity here, there is a very vast scope that Gmail actually covers. So we have to gradually reduce that scope by asking a lot of clarifying questions from the interviewer. Now there is a fixed pattern on the kind of questions you can ask in the interview in such system design rounds, and I'll try to go over that pattern with this example. So remember, our aim is to reduce the scope of the problem. And how will we reduce the scope of the problem? By asking clarifying questions. And this is a very important section of the interview because based on these clarifying questions, you'll realize the scope, and based on the scope, you'll now design further ahead in your interview. If you'll not cover this section, probably you'll waste a lot of your time in interview on the scope that the interviewer didn't even expect at the very first place. So do not skip this section in any of your system design rounds. So let's begin. So this section is clarifying questions for the interviewer. So yeah, we want to reduce the scope of the problem, right? So the very first thing that comes to my mind is, so there are a lot of functionalities at a high level that are integrated with your Gmail account. So it supports single sign-on where you use Gmail to sign into various applications, like you can sign into your Shopify account with Gmail, your Fever account with Gmail, right? So that's called authentication and authorization is a functionality through single sign-on that is supported by Gmail. Do we want to cover it? There are other functionalities as well, like your Google account, your Google Drive, your Google Sheets, your Google Calendar accounts are also linked with Gmail. Then there are other functionalities like the core email functionality of Gmail. Then Google Plus account is also linked with Gmail. What all do you want to cover as part of this problem's scope? So you can discuss with the interviewer all the possible scopes you think in your mind, and then the interviewer can answer that. Let's say in this case he should answer that let's focus on the core email functionality. Core email functionality. So by asking this question, what we are doing, we are actually clarifying the high level scope of the problem, right? Now let's jot down the problem a little bit further. Let's reduce the scope a little bit further. Now we know we want to build an email application, just the core email functionality like Gmail. Now, what do you see when you open your Gmail application, right? So you see a lot of functionalities there that are provided to you. When I open my Gmail application, on the very left side, I see folders for email classifications. You remember, right? One second. Classifications like what? Like your social, like your promotions, like your inbox, your trash, or custom folders, right? So when you open your Gmail application, you can classify your emails into various folders. You also see folder specific information. Let's say for the promotions folder, how many total emails are there, how many emails are unread, right? So you're also seeing folder info there. What else can you do when you open your Gmail core email functionality part? You can search emails. What else? You can send emails. You can add attachments to your email. You can receive emails in near real time. What else? There is multimedia support. One second. You can use emote icons there, right? So a lot of functionalities are supported whenever you open your Gmail application. You can discuss these functionalities with your interviewer. Let's say in this case, the interviewer says that let's not focus on multimedia support and emote icons. Let's focus on only these 6 core functionalities that are supported by Gmail. So why are we asking this question? Definitely to reduce the scope. But this question actually concretely defines our functional requirements for this problem, right? Now let's move ahead. Once our high level scope is clear, once our functional requirements are clear, let's move ahead and discuss a little bit further. So the second next thing that I ask from the interviewer is regarding the scale requirements. So definitely you design your any system based on the scale that it's going to bear, right? There's a difference when you're designing a email system for a college or a school, let's say having 1000 or 1500 students, in compared to when you're designing Gmail having billions of users. So definitely their entire design would be altogether different. So scale is a very important factor to consider. Do discuss with your interviewer what is going to be the scale of the system. So the first thing that I ask in scale is what are the daily active users, DAUs, for that are going to be for this system. So let's say the interview says that there are going to be 1 billion daily active users for this system. That's a huge scale. So definitely this will help us in designing our system. Second, I've mostly asked whether the system is going to be global or it's going to be local. Why I ask this question? So whenever I'm designing my system, it will help me make sure that how to tackle the latency aspect. I might have to keep my caching components near to my localized clients. I might need to replicate the data across various geographies to tackle latencies, right? So that's where this question actually helps us a lot when we go ahead further while designing the application. So we are clear with the scope, we are clear with the functional requirements, we are clear with the scale. Let's move ahead. What would we need to actually reduce the scope or know a lot more about the problem we are going to design? So there are a couple of assumptions which you need to take while actually estimating further on the scale. All right. So you need to clarify with the interviewer whether the assumptions you are taking are valid or not. So in this case, you asked about the daily active users, right? So there could be a lot of assumptions you might have to take regarding the usage pattern of this application. Let's say on average, size of single email. Can I assume it could be 50 KB? On average, size of a single attachment. Can I assume it to be 500 KB? On average, daily emails sent by a user. Let's assume on average a user sent 10 emails. On average, daily emails received by a user, let's say that is 40, 4 times the number of emails that I sent. Now, why are you asking these questions? You just want to have a buy-in from the interviewer that you are actually making a fair share of assumptions, right? And where these assumptions will help, and why are you asking this question now? Because when you will estimate the scale further, like how much storage you would need, how much QPS you would need, how much QPS your system would bear, right? Then these assumptions and the scale requirements which the interviewer mentioned to you will definitely help you to design. So I usually ask these questions prior. Definitely you might not be able to come up with all assumptions at the very beginning. You can ask this question later while you are estimating the QPS and storage as well. Okay. But these are some important set of questions to ask from the interviewer. Definitely we have now the scope, we have the functional requirements, we have the scale and scale specific assumptions. What next? So there are a couple of things you would want to focus from a system design perspective, and definitely this thing is something you should come up from your common sense, like how should that system actually be. Let me take an example before I go over this section to explain you. So we are all aware of the cap theorem, right? So in cap theorem we say that we can only have two out of these three is consistency, availability and partition, right? Two out of three can only be achieved. Not all of the three can ever be achieved together in a system. We know that in a distributed system we assume partitioning is there, we consider partitioning is there. We only have to decide between consistency and availability, right? Let's say for this email application you have to decide whether that application should be consistent or should be available. How would you decide whether in this case, so you know about cap theorem, you know two out of three things could only be available at the same time. You know, in a distributed system partitioning is there, then the only deciding factor is whether we should consider consistency or we should consider availability. Now take for an example, A sends email to B, who also receives emails from a lot of other users. Let's say C, D, E, F, these are users, right? Now let's say A, when sends email, A is able to see that the email has been sent to B on its send folder, but B has not yet received that email. Alright. So when B goes ahead and reads what all emails have it received. Let's say the database was a distributed database and there were 2 3 partitions, and the new email was written only on one or two out of the three partitions, and the entire database is not consistent yet. What do you want B to, what functionality do you want your system to have? If the data is not consistent yet, do you want B to be still able to read other emails it has received yet? Yes, definitely. I don't want B that B is not able to read an email unless the data, the new emails are not consistent in all the partitions, right? Eventually, when the data will be replicated across all the partitions, we would be able to see the new email. So that's where I would prefer availability over consistency in this case. I have just given a very brief summary. While we are designing this application, we'll go more uh, in depth over such choices. But in the next section, we usually discuss regarding the non-functional requirements about the system. We ask a couple of questions where we ask the interviewer, I feel that these should be the non-functional requirements. We take an example, like took an example for sending and receiving email. We mentioned to the interviewer that I would prefer consistency over availability. These are the non-functional requirements I would want the system to have. Are there any additional non-functional requirements? We ask the interviewer if he or she wants me to focus, right? So that we can have a buy-in from the interviewer. So So usually when I actually ask about the non-functional requirements, I usually touch regarding these four non-functional requirements: reliability, availability, scalability, consistency. So we will discuss a lot more in our course what reliability, availability, scalability, and consistency are. But assuming that people know who have attended our previous lectures, so I would definitely want the system to be very reliable. I have sent an email, and emails are used in corporate companies. I don't want it to be lost. I want it to be persistent. If an application, right, that's what reliability is all about. If an application is being used by 1 billion users and that application goes down, I don't want that. There will be an impact on 1 billion customers. I want this application to be highly available. Its downtime should be very less or non-existent. Scalability. Definitely I'll have to scale this application for 1 billion users. This application need to be very scalable. And then finally consistency. As I've explained to you, I would have discussed this entire thing with the interviewer. I would have mentioned that I would prefer availability over consistency in this type of setup. Had it been a transactional setup, I would have preferred consistency over availability. Let's say I've been building a bank, I would building a financial system or a payment system. I would have preferred consistency over availability. So I have discussed some main pillars of non-functional requirements, and considering these things in mind, let's say if I'm preferring availability over consistency, I could go ahead and use a NoSQL DB, whereas in financial systems I could go ahead and use a SQL DB supporting asset transactions and other things. That's why it's better to discuss these things with the interviewer at the very beginning so that you can justify your choices later. Next, what? So we have discussed scope, functional requirements, scale requirements, assumptions regarding scale, non-functional requirements. What next? So usually I ask these extra questions as well, whether we are building a backend system or we are actually supposed to optimize clients as well. Now this might seem a very dumb question, but there are a lot of places where clients also play a part of the role. A lot of responsibilities are offloaded to the clients. For example, if you are uploading uh, an attachment that is more than 20 MB or 25 MB, Gmail can give a validation error. It might not allow it. Such responsibilities might be on the client side, right? So, like for example, Dropbox has some chunkers, right, encoders. So a lot of some responsibilities are there on the client side as well. Do we want to handle the client side complexities as well, or we just want to focus on the back end part of the problem? And what else can we ask? We have asked that's a global, yeah, global and local. The next thing that we can ask is, do we want cross device consistency? Now, this consistency and that consistency from a meaning perspective is same, but that's a database consistency. Here is a device level consistency. For example, you're opening your Gmail on your MacBook, on your iPad, on your iPhone, and your friend's iPhone. So, if an email is received, it should be reflected in all the devices with very minimal latency. Do we want such feature or not? So we can get a vein from the buy-in or vein from the interviewer on this problem or on this question. So we have covered at a very high level these 7 baskets where I usually ask clarifying questions from the interviewer, and these baskets are clarifying the high level scope, clarifying the functional requirements, clarifying the scale requirements, clarifying the assumptions regarding the scale, clarifying the non-functional requirements, backend client and cross-device consistency. If you see at a very high level, this actually apply to any system design problem that you might face during your interview. And once you have come up to this part of the interview, you have shown the data points that you can deal with ambiguity. You have reduced the scope. You have come up with suggestions on your own, like what could be the functional, non-functional requirements. Now you have a picture in your mind. What are you going ahead to design? So scope is reduced a lot further. So in the next video, based on the scope, we'll do 3 things. We'll enhance our assumptions further. We will study about read QPS, write QPS, write different APIs we can expose and their signatures, and then estimate about our storage requirements. So majorly, the next video will be API design as well as estimations of storage and QPS. Stay tuned, guys. Thank you very much.